How in the world did I even start to plan a 6,000-mile journey on horseback with 2 to 3 horses across 25 different US states with all their diverse environments, all the different situations we would come into contact with? Where do you even start to plan a trip like that? Now, one thing guys that horses have taught me a lot about in my life is good preparation generally leads to better results. And the Year of the Mustang as a journey took an immense amount of planning. Now that being said, you can plan and plan and plan till your brain goes numb. You are never going to be truly prepared for what is real life, the great outdoors, the great outward experience that you haven't experienced yet. So where that comes in is the prior education and information that you obtain sets you up to be more successful when you do run into things that are unexpected. And that's hopefully what this video is going to help with, because the reality is you never can truly prepare for everything that this world has to throw at you, and in this case, at you and your horses, talking about long riding. But if you can answer these 5 questions, you can generally cover all of your bases and will give you a really good foundation for what you need to understand and have figured out before even attempting something like a long distance horseback journey, which has so many different moving parts. The Year of the Mustang journey was extremely complex with all the diverse places we went through, going 6,000 miles through so many different locations and places, meeting so many different people, staying in so many different situations. It's a lot to cover, it's a lot to figure out, it can be a little overwhelming. So we're gonna go over, guys, the most important things you need to figure out. All right, guys, the first question we're going over is, what is your goal? Now, the overall goal of the Year of the Mustang journey was to travel 6,000 miles through 25 states, starting in Heber City, Utah, going all the way to the Atlantic Ocean in New Jersey, and then going all the way back to where we started. I wanted to do it entirely without trailering between camps. Now, part of the original goal was for the same 3 horses to do the entire trip. However, I did not meet that goal because only 2 of my horses did the entirety of the trip. And I'll talk more about that in a second, but the point of that is to say that my goals changed while I was in the middle of the Year of the Mustang journey. And for that horse's sake, that was the absolute right call. So the lesson there is you have to be willing to adjust your goal for the sake of putting your animals first. Now, this is kind of just a life lesson. It is difficult to accomplish anything of any grandeur if you don't actually know the specifics of what you want to accomplish. So we need to answer those questions as to where are you going to start, where do you want to end up, and how far do you want to go? Not to mention, what are the experiences you want to have on the way? What are you hoping that your horses will accomplish? Now, you might be thinking, I just want to go on a week-long pack trip. Why do I have to think about bigger, drawn-out goals? And in truth, it does not matter, because it doesn't matter how far you're going, the same questions apply. You might not have all the same parameters as someone who's attempting a 1,000-mile journey with their horses, but even just going a week long, you need to answer those same questions of what you want to accomplish specifically if you want to be successful at that. All right, number 2 is, what can your animals actually do? Now, this is a broad question where you as a stock owner have to take responsibility for what your animals actually are capable of accomplishing and what their limitations might be. Age, physical condition, body size, dietary needs, veterinary needs, hoof condition, and experience level are all major things that will determine whether a horse can go for a one-day trail ride, or weeks and weeks camping out in the backcountry, or months and months passing through big cities, along highways, and every other environment you can imagine. This goes back to the question of, what is your goal? Can your animals physically do the goal that you want to do? There's a major difference in being in your covered arena on your horse for an hour and being out in the elements from dawn till dusk in hard terrain. To avoid injury and colic, it is super important that your animals are in as best a shape they can be to meet your goal. Now, this really comes down to knowing your animals, but generally, the older a horse is, the more difficult a time they're going to have over an extended period doing this kind of work. Now, my personal example with this, and a hard lesson that I had to learn while on the Year of the Mustang journey, is obviously with my horse Bella, who is 18 years old for the time that she was on the trip with us. Now, Bella traveled with us over 1,600 miles from Utah to Missouri before I decided to have her trailered home for weight loss reasons. Now, Bella's weight loss was extremely gradual over that 4.5-month period. However, it did become apparent to me within the first month of being on the trip that she wasn't going to be the easy keeper she'd always been in her life prior. Due to her smaller size and her age, she simply wasn't able to meet the demand of the journey, so the right call was for her to be done. This, however, was not the case for Eddie and Denver, who healthily maintained most of their weight throughout the entirety of the trip from the beginning to the end. Eddie and Denver are 13 and 7 years old, and they're both significantly larger than Bella. So what is my suggestion for knowing your horses and their capabilities prior to going on a long-distance horseback journey? I am hereby coining what I have decided to call the 1/10 rule. Do not take your horse on a day ride out in the mountains if you can't even handle doing an hour ride at home. Do not take your horse on a 100-mile pack trip if you haven't already done a 10-mile day out in the mountains. Now, if you wanted to do a 3,000-mile trip, I highly recommend you go and do a 300-miler first, which is already a very large trip on its own. It will shock you how much you are going to learn just from that experience, not to mention you will get a clear image of whether or not your animals are physically capable of attempting such a journey. The care of your animals is what's going to determine your success in whatever you choose to do as far as your goals go, so make sure you do not set goals that are going to exceed their capabilities. Number 3 is, what kind of an experience are you trying to have on your trip? Now, this very much goes back to what is your overall goal for the trip. The Year of the Mustang journey for me was extremely diverse as far as an experience goes. I had weeks and weeks where I was in the backcountry for weeks and weeks at a time, and I had weeks and weeks where I was passing through urban areas, meeting hundreds of people a day. I had many nights where I was staking the horses out on public lands and making camp, eating whatever I had packed with me. And I had many nights where I was riding in, keeping the horses in public fairgrounds, and then walking into town to get a bite to eat at a bar. And while there are plenty of long riders who do things similar to the way I did, for the majority of people in long-distance horse travel, mine was a very unique way of living. For me, there were pros and cons about everything I was doing, but I've had plenty of people say to me how they thought me riding down big city streets in New Jersey sounded absolutely terrible. Meanwhile, I've had other people ask me how I ever managed living by myself so long in the absolute middle of nowhere. And while I preferred to ride my horses in the middle of nowhere, that was not always the option I had for the parameters that I had set on the Year of the Mustang journey. Answering this question comes down to where you want to go for the sake of the experience. Number 4 is, do you have the skills and connections to take care of you and your horses? Now, because for me, the Year of the Mustang was a solo journey, I typically speak from a more singular perspective. That being said, I don't typically recommend this for most people. I don't care where you're at, managing multiple horses, especially in camping and packing situations, is way easier with a partner. Not to mention, with the right partner, the overall burden of the number of skills you have, the work that has to get done, not to mention the problems you might have to face, can be greatly relieved with a second set of hands. Now, whether you are single or plural, there is a lot of demands when it comes to care for your horses and looking after yourself. For example, knowing how to pack gear on a horse will determine what items and how many you can bring with you. The experience level and trust between you and your horse will determine the type of obstacles you are able to overcome. Depending on how long you are going for, will you need a farrier to work on your horse's feet? Having first aid materials is great, but having the skills and the experience to use those first aid materials on you or your horses if you are injured is a whole nother thing entirely. Not to mention, you can only pack so much. What will you do if you have a horse get injured beyond your ability to take care of it? One example of this from the Year of the Mustang journey is I kept an ever-growing list of contacts for veterinarians that were closest to the route so that I would at least have a phone number I could call and refer to if I had to. This came in handy a couple of times for me and mitigated some of that risk. Another example is, if you were stranded in a remote location with or without horses, would you have the skills to survive and take care of yourself, whether that was until you could get found by help or that you could get yourself out to a safe location? As you can see, there's a whole bunch of questions that fall under this main question of preparation and skills that you need to be able to undertake a long distance ride. So for that, I would say this is where you need to put in the most time and research into figuring out how you're going to handle all these things, because they really are going to determine the limitations of what you can do. Obviously, the more you develop these skills for yourself, the more prepared and independent you can be, but that might not be how you intend to do your trip. Now, the 5th and final question, guys, that we're going to go over is, how long will it take you to reach your goal? Now, the original plan for the Year of the Mustang journey was for it to take a year. I left on September 25th, 2023, and planned to get back September 24th, 2024. I ended up getting back December 5th of 2024, 14 months and 10 days in total. Now, if you're interested in learning why it took me so much longer than anticipated to complete the Year of the Mustang journey, go check out this video here. Now, I think you guys have been able to figure out up until this point that every one of these questions all ties back to question number one. What is your goal? If you want to travel X amount of miles in Y amount of days, then how many miles per day do you need to travel in order to make that happen? Now, that 14 months and 10 days includes a significant amount of rest time. Now, if I subtract an extended rest that I took in Arkansas as well as an additional extended rest in New Jersey, my average days per week was about 5 days on the trail out of 7. Now, that being said, I did a lot of 6-day weeks. I basically did 6 days a week from Illinois till we got back in Utah, not to mention a number of other 6-day weeks spread throughout the rest of the trip. For the entire trip, we averaged about 20 miles a day. Now, my daily mileage has a big range. I did days as short as 9 miles and all the way up to 35 miles at the longest. Now, those two extremes are complete outliers. Most of the trip I did between 15 and 25 miles per day. This brought me to an average of about 100 to 120 miles per week. And I can tell you from experience, guys, that keeping that up for over a year is a lot. Now, back to question number 2, you have to know what your animals can do. For this, my suggestion is the longer you plan to be out on the trail, the more you need to reduce your daily average mileage. The alternative to this is increase the number of rest days per week. Now, I personally don't recommend that any horses do more than 6 days straight without a full day's rest to follow. Now, I just wanted to share my experience with you guys so that you can wrap your heads around what I would say is even feasible. The longer you are out there, the more opportunities the universe has to slow you down. In setting your goal, give yourself plenty of time to do what you want to do. Ask yourself, what is the average mileage I'd like to do per day? Then, go and reduce it by a little bit. You will not regret that decision, and I can guarantee that. And I know this sounds like I'm only talking to those who are planning month-plus horseback journeys, but the truth is this applies to anyone who's new into overnight trips with horses. Alright guys, I hope that gave you some good insight into what it actually takes to plan a long-distance horse ride. Now, I plan to do a lot more videos covering things like mapping and navigation and a lot of other stuff that I learned on the Year of the Mustang journey, so keep an eye out for those, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Also, go and subscribe, because like I said, we're putting videos out every single week here on this channel. Also, if you want to support this channel, please go to yearofthemustang.com and you can get yourself some merchandise, or you can donate there. You can also drop us a super thanks on YouTube. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, adios.